Hello, my name is Jacqueline Pollauf, and today I wanted to share an overview to the harp part from Brahms' Requiem. Now, of course, Johannes Brahms was a fantastic composer who left us all kinds of beautiful music, but he did not write very much for the harp. For example, he wrote 4 symphonies, but none of those include harp. However, he did include harp in his Requiem, which he wrote for 2 soloists, chorus, and orchestra. And Brahms specified that with the harp included in the orchestra, that the part could be doubled by 2 harpists playing the same part in unison in order to increase the sound. And it is sometimes performed that way and sometimes performed just with a single harp. Brahms' Requiem is quite a long piece with 7 movements, and performances last anywhere from 65 to 80 minutes, so well over an hour. The harp only plays in 3 of the 7 movements, movements 1, 2, and 7, so it's relatively a small part compared to the length and the number of movements overall, but it is quite important in a few passages. And it's well written for the harp without anything too challenging to it. What I wanted to do today is to go over each movement in turn and discuss the part and play some passages as a demonstration in order to provide a really thorough overview to this harp part. I also wanted to mention that my edition of this harp part can be found in my book, Choral Repertoire, Harp Parts. And in this book, I have the complete part, including some helpful information specifically for harpists, pedal markings, cues, things like that. Toward the end of the video today, I'll show a couple pages and talk more about my edition. But also in this book, I have a second piece by Brahms. Many people may be familiar with his work, The 4 Songs, which he wrote for treble chorus, 2 horns, and harp. And unlike the Requiem that we're talking about today, that has a very challenging part with really a lot going on. In movement 1, the harp rests for several phrases and then enters with a passage of triplet arpeggios. This passage is not very exposed. The chorus and the horns are most prominent here, and the harp is more in the background. And it's a pretty straightforward passage. Brahms is using primarily arpeggiated triads and inversions, so all very standard, and the hands are just playing in unison, an octave apart. The trickiest thing is that toward the end of the passage, as the arpeggios are kind of making their way down the harp, there's a few spots where you jump and your 4th finger lands on the string that your left thumb just played. So there's a bit of an overlap there. And in those spots, it's just important to place late with the right hand 4th finger to avoid a buzz. So I'll go ahead and play this passage. After about 25 bars of rest, the same triplet passage returns. And it's exactly the same the second time, which is very helpful in preparing the part. Then there are some more rests, and then the harp comes in again at the end of the movement to play the final 9 measures of movement 1. And this is really an important and exposed passage for the harp. Compositionally, it's serving to kind of wrap everything up and bring it all to a beautiful resolution. The harp writing here is very standard, primarily just arpeggios, moving between 16th notes, 8th notes, and triplets, with a couple of chords as well. And everything is very comfortable. Neither hand ever has to span more than an octave, so it all fits into the hand really well. It can be important in a couple spots just to think about placing late again to maximize the resonance. So I'll go ahead and play these final 9 measures of movement 1. In movement 2, the harp plays quite a lot. The harp has long passages of chords at the beginning and end of the movement, but in both cases they fit in with the rest of the orchestra and are not exposed. And Brahms uses really standard voicings for the chords, which is quite helpful, so everything falls into the hand really well. There are a couple of spots with some tricky pedals. In particular, there's this passage that comes up more than once where Brahms is using a G flat and an E flat in one chord, and then on the very next quarter note, the chord now has a G natural and an E natural. So obviously that necessitates 2 quick pedal changes. For myself, I like to keep the G in the right foot, of course, and then move my left foot over to the E, so I'm cross-pedaling for that. You can also use an enharmonic solution and use a D sharp for the E flat to avoid having 2 pedals on the right side of the harp. So I'll go ahead and play a bit of the chord passage here at the beginning of the movement, and this will include that tricky chromatic spot. There are some choices in how to play these chords, particularly when it comes to rolling the chords and adding muffles. So I was just playing all of the chords flat or simultaneously, but you could add a quick roll to them. And in terms of muffling, particularly at the beginning of this chordal passage, there's plenty of time between chords, so you could come back to the same strings to add a muffle or add a muffle like that. And for both of these things, rolling the chords or not, and then muffling or not, I generally wait to the first rehearsal and see what fits in best with the way the orchestra and chorus are performing the work. Next, I'd like to demonstrate a passage of chords from the next section of movement 2. And here Brahms has changed the rhythm, so the chords are now 8th note chords, which is faster than in the first passage. And this makes them just a little bit trickier with having to jump at a fairly quick pace between the different inversions. There are also still quite a few pedals here, including the G flat, E flat to G natural, E natural. So this might be a spot to spend a bit of extra time on in practicing, perhaps practicing it really slowly or in small sections and putting it together. It could also be a good spot to practice with the hands staggered, so rather than playing everything at the same time as written, you could play your left hand, right hand, right hand, going back and forth and working through it. I find that's a great way to really kind of focus in on each hand individually while still thinking about how they combine. So I'll go ahead and play a few measures here to show this passage. Later on in the movement, all of these chord passages return, so you actually play them all twice. In between the chord passages, though, there is a short section of arpeggios at a faster tempo. And this is the most exposed part of the movement for the harp. These arpeggios are actually doubling the flute, so the harp and the flute are accompanying the voices here. And the arpeggios are rocking back and forth between different intervals and the outlines of different chords, and the hands are playing in unison, an octave apart. So it's a little bit tricky. I would advise coming up with a fingering that works really well and trying to be very consistent about that. And then also, similarly to the first movement, there are some spots where a string is shared between the 2 hands. So that's another thing to watch out for here. I'll go ahead and play part of this passage of arpeggios. After movement 2, the harp is tacit for movements 3, 4, 5, and 6, which is quite a long time given the length of this work. Then in movement 7, the harp has many rests and just enters for the final 9 measures of the movement. And these final 9 measures are the exact same for the harp as the final 9 measures of movement 1. So you're just replaying these arpeggios and chords that you already played in movement 1. And it's really a beautiful and satisfying, I think, very peaceful close to the entire work. But again, just like movement 1, it is exposed, and it can be stressful to come in after waiting for such a very long time to make this entrance. I wanted to share a shot of my edition of the harp part for Brahms' Requiem. And we're just looking at movement 7 here, but of course it is the complete part within the book. And in putting my edition together, I did not alter or simplify what Brahms wrote in any way, but I did add some harp-specific information. So you can see at the beginning of the movement here, we have a pedal chart, and then there are not any pedal changes in this movement, but in the other movements where there are pedal changes, those are all printed in the edition. Also in some of the other movements, there's some suggested fingering for tricky spots. But in this movement, the big thing that I added is all of these cues. And I did that because, as I was mentioning, it can be quite stressful to make this entrance. And it's a lot of measures of rest to count. You come in and measure 158 here, so there's 157 measures of rest to count before that entrance. So I've put the cues periodically so that you can just count these first couple passages and then check your counting with this cue, count the next couple passages, check the counting with the cue, and so forth. And then just before the entrance, you can see there's all these vocal lines so that you can really follow along with what the choir is doing and then make a very confident entrance for that exposed harp part. I'll go ahead and include some links to the book below in the description of this video. And since the harp part is the same here as in movement 1, I am not going to demonstrate this passage a second time. I thought it would be more helpful to show all of these cues and how the harp fits in within this movement. I hope this video has given you a thorough overview to the harp part for Brahms' Requiem. It's really a beautiful work and quite satisfying to play, so good luck to you in your playing and performing of this beautiful piece.